This is beyond imagination, and my condolences.
I heard a loud explosion, but I didn't know what it was.
Dedicating all available resources.
A start in chaos. The beginning was marked by chaos. The night of October 31st, 2000, Taoyuan International Airport in Taipei was engulfed in rain and wind. Typhoon Jiangzen was sweeping through the area, bringing strong gusts that reduced runway visibility to only a few hundred meters. Under such conditions, most airlines chose to delay or cancel their flights. But for Singapore Airlines, a carrier renowned for its discipline and punctuality, Flight SQ006 was kept on schedule. The Boeing 747-400, registration 9V-SPK, prepared for its overnight journey to Los Angeles, a trans-Pacific flight lasting over 10 hours. There were 179 people on board, mostly connecting international passengers. The three-man flight crew, all highly experienced, were present in the cockpit. Outside, the rain lashed against the windows. Water droplets were swept diagonally by the wind, blurring the runway lights into streaked flashes. Operations at the airport were tense. Many other flights were awaiting takeoff clearance, and air traffic control had to manage in near-blind visibility. The ground movement radar, the system for tracking aircraft positions on the airfield, was inoperable. This meant that all guidance relied entirely on verbal instructions via radio and visual observation, a major risk in such weather. In the middle of the stormy night, SQ006 taxied out from the gate. The crew knew the conditions were unfavorable, but they also understood the pressure to take off on time. In the airline industry, sometimes a small decision, made under imperfect circumstances, can trigger an irreversible chain reaction. That night, all those conditions, the typhoon, low visibility, operational pressure, were present, setting the stage for a fatal error about to unfold. Confidence in limited conditions. In the cockpit of the Boeing 747-400 that night were three men who had accumulated thousands of flight hours across the globe. Captain Fu Chi Kong, 41, was a highly regarded figure in the Singapore Airlines team. He had over 11,000 flight hours, known for being calm and methodical in all situations. Beside him was First Officer Latif Sino, skilled in aircraft control with years of experience operating in bad weather conditions in Asia. In the jump seat was Relief Captain and Kong Lang, who was there to assist during the startup and takeoff phases. This crew was familiar with Taoyuan Airport. They had landed in heavy rain just one day prior, when Typhoon Jiangzen was still distant. It was this very experience that led them to believe this time would not be significantly different. For them, this was just another flight on a foul night, a risk manageable with standard procedures and professional skill. However, the pressure in the cockpit didn't just stem from the weather. The tight schedule, waiting passengers, and the pressure to maintain departure punctuality required them to make a quick decision. In aviation, such decisions are often made in a matter of minutes, and every minute carries the weight of both experience and expectation. None of them intended to take a risk. They were merely trying to complete their mission the way they had done thousands of times before. But tonight, amidst the wind, rain, and near-zero visibility, even a minor deviation in judgment was enough to lead to an irreversible chain of events. The ghost runway in the storm. Taoyuan International Airport, in 2000, had three parallel runways, 05L, 05R, and 06, but only one of them, 05L, was the legal operational runway that night. To its right, 05R had once been a temporary taxiway opened during an overload phase and was then closed for expansion construction. Its surface was still cluttered with bulldozers, rollers, barricades, and construction equipment. These items were not moved, only temporarily sectioned off by a few weak rows of red warning lights, a light almost disappearing amidst the rain and fog, with visibility reduced to near zero. Distinguishing between the two adjacent runways became extremely difficult, especially since the pilot's airport map did not clearly show the closure status of 05R, and the ground signage was placed in a position not easily visible during the rainy night. From the cockpit's perspective, The two runways were almost perfectly parallel, separated by only a few hundred meters, enough to cause a deadly confusion if observational conditions were inadequate. Warnings about the construction status existed in internal documents, but no system was in place to actively prevent aircraft from entering that area. There were no physical barriers, no special signals other than a few flashing red lights in the sea of rainwater. That night, 05R was no longer a runway, but on the radar, on the map, and in the eyes of the flight crew, it still looked like a long path sufficient for a Boeing 747 takeoff. This overlap between reality and information was the most dangerous piece of the puzzle that Taipei night. A ghost runway that persisted simply because everyone thought it had vanished. Errors accumulated from system and human factors. Before departure, the Singapore Airlines SQ-006 crew had thoroughly reviewed the pre-flight information documents, the section which clearly noted that runway 05R was closed. But in an industry where hundreds of technical notes appear daily, that brief phrase failed to create a true sense of alarm. There were no visual diagrams explicitly showing the construction zones, nor were there updated photos or maps for the pilots to visualize the degree of danger. To them, closed simply meant not permitted for use. Not a construction site full of bulldozers and concrete barricades right in the middle of the takeoff path. The Boeing 747 began to taxi. Taoyuan Airport's ground guidance system made orientation even more difficult. All taxiway lights were illuminated simultaneously, instead of only lighting up the assigned route as is done in Singapore or other major airports. In the heavy rain and strong winds, this chaotic brilliance made it hard for the pilots to distinguish the main path from a safe turn. The situation was worse because the ground radar, the tool allowing air traffic control to precisely track aircraft positions on the airfield, was out of service. This meant that in that crucial moment, no one on the ground knew exactly where SQ-006 was. Individually, each factor might not have caused a disaster, but when they all appeared together, ambiguous notes, confusing lighting, inoperable radar, and near zero visibility, they combined into a chain of systemic errors. In aviation, this is the most dangerous kind of failure. Errors that do not start with one person, but with an entire operating system that appeared to be functioning correctly. Stepping onto the death runway, the rain continued to fall violently as the Singapore Airlines Boeing 747-400 slowly taxied onto the taxiway. On the windshield, rainwater blurred everything. Taxiway lights reflected on the wet ground created a maze of light, green, yellow, and red intertwined. Under these circumstances, the crew's visibility was severely limited, with only the chain of guide lights serving as the sole reference point for orientation. According to the plan, the aircraft was supposed to follow the route to runway 05L, the only open runway. But at Taoyuan that night, the lights leading to 05L were dim and sparse, almost vanishing in the heavy rain. Meanwhile, the lights toward 05R were a bright, clear, and steady green chain, much easier to see. Trusting his instincts and the lights ahead, the captain steered the aircraft to turn onto 05R, believing he was on the correct path. No one in the cockpit realized they were heading straight onto a runway that had been closed for construction. When they stopped at the runway threshold, the first officer noted that the PVD system, the runway centerline guidance display, was not showing. This was a clear sign of an abnormality, indicating the aircraft was not in the correct position. But in the stressful environment, with rain lashing across the glass and restricted visibility, everything appeared normal to the naked eye. The captain responded briefly,
"Okay, runway
"It's
in
fine.
sight."
I can see the runway." And with that single sentence, the final error was validated. From that moment, the Boeing 747 was in the wrong place. It was not on the legal runway for takeoff, but on a construction site full of equipment. And in just a few more seconds, everything would turn into a tragedy. Disaster in just 41 seconds. Exactly at 23:16, air traffic control cleared the Boeing 747-400 for takeoff, completely believing the aircraft was correctly positioned on runway 05L. Under the pouring rain, the captain advanced the throttles, and the aircraft began to accelerate on the slick, wet surface of runway 05R, the closed runway used as a construction site. Speed increased rapidly, surpassing 250 kilometers per hour in just a few seconds. The surrounding space was obscured by the rain curtain and the thick darkness, making all visual cues indistinct in the final moments. Lights suddenly reflected onto an obstacle ahead, the concrete barricades and construction machinery still lying there, motionless but extremely dangerous. The captain shouted a warning, "Something's there!" But the sound had barely left his mouth when the impact occurred. The front section of the aircraft slammed violently into the barricades and construction equipment. The force of the collision caused the fuselage to break in two immediately. Fire erupted, engulfing the tail section and spreading rapidly. The entire event took place in only 41 seconds from the moment the aircraft began to roll. Air traffic control still believed the Boeing was operating correctly on the legal runway, unaware of the disaster unfolding just a few hundred meters away. This was the tragic moment that ended the fateful flight, marking the direct consequence of a series of errors in guidance systems, procedures, and situational awareness. An accident preceded by seemingly simple factors that led to unforeseen consequences. Consequences and costly lessons. The accident of Flight SQ-006 resulted in a catastrophic toll with 83 fatalities, while 96 passengers and crew members fortunately survived but suffered severe injuries. This was the first time Singapore Airlines had faced a serious disaster in the company's operational history. The official investigation after the accident determined the core cause was the crew's confusion of runways under limited visibility conditions. The insufficient lighting system, unclear warning lights, combined with the lack of ground supervision, meant the flight crew's error was not detected in time. The air traffic control system also lacked an operational ground radar, further increasing the risk without additional warnings. The investigation results exposed multiple weaknesses in the safety procedures and navigation equipment at the airport, forcing the global aviation industry to reevaluate operating standards in bad weather and limited visibility conditions. Regulations regarding runway guidance lighting were tightened, pilot training on ground orientation was enhanced, and more thorough checks before every flight in adverse weather were encouraged. This accident became a costly lesson for the entire world aviation industry, clearly demonstrating that no matter how much technology and experience develop, coordination and safety procedures must always be strictly maintained and continuously improved to prevent similar tragedies from recurring. This remains a painful testament to the consequence when both human and systemic failures combine to prevent a series of seemingly